Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to preview Week 4 of fantasy football. The Week 4 rankings are live on DraftSharks.com. The Free Agent Finder is there to help you find any value that might be lingering on the waiver wire after this week's runs. I know I was in there making some changes right before we started this recording, trying to make sure I grab any upside guys that are still out there after the waivers run and guys that other people in my league have dropped. Jared, have you had any good drops lately that you picked up, like scooped after somebody else made a move?
No, can't say I have, unfortunately. But yeah, the Free Agent Finder, I mean, that thing saves me. It must save me 2 or 3 hours per week just going through. I think I have like 12 managed leagues this year, which is about 8 more than I'd like to have. Doing waivers on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, it's huge as a time saver.
Yeah, especially being able to toggle between teams across sites, because that's my biggest issue is I always like which site am I going to forget about this week? So it's nice to have my one listing of teams to make sure that I remember. Let's open this preview though by talking about some quarterbacks that might show up on waiver wires soon, or at least might have you looking to the waiver wire for a potential replacement right now, because they've been a little shaky so far. First up is Daniel Jones, Jared, QB 22 in total fantasy points through 3 games. Wide swings, though. QB 29 versus the Cowboys in the opener. QB 1 against the Cardinals in week 2. QB 31 against the 49ers last week. Mike White threw 2 passes in week 3 and outscored Daniel Jones. So why should I still believe in Daniel Jones for week 4 and maybe beyond?
Well, he's been very predictable, which we like, right? I mean, he struggled against 2 top 4 defenses in the NFL and the Niners and Cowboys, and he has the big game in a good matchup against Arizona. And this week on Monday night, he gets another good matchup. He's home for the Seahawks, who are 25th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterback so far. They're 28th in pass defense DVOA. We'll see if Jones gets Saquon Barkley back. It'd be nice to get his left tackle Andrew Thomas back, but even without those guys, I think he's going to finish closer to quarterback 1 than the quarterback 29 and 30 or whatever it was in weeks 1 and 3. So I think he's okay to use this week. I think longer term, you definitely want to pair someone with Jones. He's shown us even over the past few seasons he is very volatile from week to week, and I do think he's matchup dependent.
Yes, and not a whole lot of talent around him in that offense to help support him through tougher matchups. So yes, certainly not somebody you want to just trust every week. But he is inside our top 10 this week. Makes me uncomfortable to see it, but then I look around at everybody else. I'm like, yeah, all right, it makes sense. Justin Fields has not been as productive in any week so far. He was QB 12 in week 1 against the Packers, but it's gone downhill since. QB 20 against the Bucs in week 2, QB 24 against the Chiefs last week, and probably lucky to be that with 99 passing yards. What are we doing with Justin Fields?
Yes, there was some good news from last week, and that's that the Bears remembered that Justin Fields is, one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the NFL. Fields last week had 7 designed carries and 11 total carries. Those were both season highs for him. And even comparing them to last year, he averaged 5.9 designed carries per game last year, 10.7 total carries per game. So he was above those marks in week 3, versus what he did all last year. And remember, Fields was quarterback 7 in fantasy points per game last year on 150 passing yards per game. He's actually averaging 175 passing yards per game this season. So I don't have much confidence that passing production is going to get much better. But if he continues to get 11 carries per game, it's going to be tough for him to not at least score as a lower level quarterback 1.
The passing production should get worse versus what it's been so far this season, because it hasn't been good for him to be throwing the ball more. He topped 200 yards passing each of the first 2 weeks because he wasn't running enough. The team sucks so far. And when Justin Fields was helping us in fantasy last year, it was because he was running a lot. Every once in a while, he would throw a touchdown, but we need more rushing going forward. You absolutely need to have a second quarterback around. You can't just keep Justin Fields in your lineup every week and wait for it to get better. It would be nice to not start him this week. We did just see Denver give up a whole lot of yards and points to the Dolphins last week, so there's upside. I'm just not ready to believe in Fields and the Bears to leverage that. Certainly he's right around the bottom of QB1 territory for us this week, but it's a matchup where he should be like fourth.
Yeah, exactly. I'd rather use Fields in like DFS this week and not use him in season long. I mean, he is ahead of guys like Russell Wilson and Brock Purdy in our week 4 rankings. I wouldn't kill you for picking up those guys if they're available in your league and starting them over Fields this week. I think they're safer. But like you said, I mean, this is a matchup. If Fields gets that type of rushing usage again this week, I do think he'll deliver against this Broncos defense.
Joe Burrow has not delivered yet. He had the awful week 1 against the Browns we know about. Better in week 2, but still just QB 21 in what was a really high scoring fantasy week. And then Monday night, if you look at it versus his first 2 weeks and, versus the uncertainty that he was even going to play heading into the game, it seems like a positive, but it was just 259 yards passing, no touchdowns, 1 interception, 53.1% completions. I'm going to hold on to a nugget of positivity here, though, because PFF passing grades for Joe Burrow have gone 30th among QBs in week 1, 16th among week 2 quarterbacks, 9th in week 3. So it seems like things are starting to get on track, even if they're still well below what we wanted with where we drafted Burrow.
Yeah, and I even thought the second half of last week's game was better for him than the first half. And Burrow said after the game that he avoided any setback with that calf. He was a full participant in Wednesday's practice this week, which he got in 0 full practices last week. So it does seem like he's trending in the right direction. And now he gets this Titans matchup that we love. Titans matchup that, kind of got Deshaun Watson back on track last week for at least one game. The Titans are 26th in pass defense DVOA. They're much, much tougher against the run, and they're 24th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterback. So I'm not sure Burrow is ready for an eruption game yet, but this is a matchup that, will definitely boost his fantasy production this week.
Right. If he is ready for anything close to that, this is the matchup to do it. So we had a question in Discord, Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, or Jared Goff this week, which shows you how Joe Burrow's season's going so far. We have Joe Burrow 1/10 of a point ahead of Russell Wilson, with Goff a fair amount behind those guys in our default rankings for the week. Is that how you'd play it?
Yeah, I would go Burrow there. I guess I can't say he's safer than the other two because the chance of re-injury, but if he doesn't re-injure that calf, I do think he's a pretty safe bet for nice numbers just because of this matchup. We've seen every team to face the Titans so far has gone super pass heavy. The Bengals are a pass heavy offense anyways. So I just think you're going to get a ton of volume from Burrow this week.
I'd throw safety out the window if I'm trying to decide among those 3 guys, because none of those 3 is safe. You'd think that maybe Jared Goff wins on safety, but he's been a very different fantasy producer home and away, and he's away against Green Bay. So I would go Joe Burrow for the upside in this matchup, and fingers crossed that he's anything close to what we drafted. Your team intel page, of course, is your best place to see exactly who we would start in your specific lineup any week. It includes our baseline projection for that guy for the week. It also factors in projected upside for that player into that equation, and it lets you see consensus projections for the week for that player, just in case you want to compare our opinion on him to the market for that player for the week. So team intel page, that will give you the answer. If you get in our Discord or tweet at one of us and say, hey, who should I start between these 2 guys? We've already answered it on the website. So feel free to check your team intel page for that answer. Jared, before we get away from the Bengals, T. Higgins has been maybe even worse than Joe Burrow so far. Wide receiver 114 in PPR in week 1, wide receiver 4 in week 2, wide receiver 83 in week 3. What are you doing with T. Higgins right now?
Yeah, it's been a classic start to the season for T. Higgins. I mean, if you owned him any point over basically his NFL career, it's up and down. It's a roller coaster ride. I think that's just been exacerbated by Joe Burrow's injury and the fact that he's been struggling, and that's made Higgins' floor even lower. I think he's a buy in redraft though right now, because I do think, as Burrow puts this calf injury behind him, fingers crossed for no more setbacks, that, just the passing game in general is going to get better. Higgins has been healthy so far. The usage is more than fine. He has a 23% target share. That's about where he was last year, as the, 1B to Jahmyr Chase. Higgins leads the Bengals in air yards. He has been getting more of those downfield looks than Jahmyr Chase has. It's just, he has a 36% catch rate. Higgins does through 3 weeks. He was at 68 and 67% the previous 2 seasons. That's going to rebound. I think Higgins is going to be fine. It's going to be inconsistent, but he's going to give you a handful of more wide receiver 1 level weeks, I think.
He's going to be inconsistent. Almost all wide receivers are inconsistent. His biggest problem has been Joe Burrow so far. And if we expect Joe Burrow to get better, and I think that we should, and like I said, the PFF passing grades say that he is already getting better, then T. Higgins is definitely a buy. Not only does he lead the Bengals in air yards share, he's fourth among all wide receivers in that category, behind only Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, just ahead of A.J. Brown. So the usage is fine. If the quarterback gets better, then T. Higgins is ready to help. Definitely not going to be as extreme in his variability as he has been through these first 3 weeks. Speaking of variability, Jared, we saw the high end of the Dolphins offense last week, the high end of any offense. I don't think we can ever expect another game like that, but Raheem Mostert, Achane, what do we do with these guys going forward? I want to start with Achane because, you know, obviously he's the one who went from doing nothing to doing everything last week. And to me, he's kind of similar this week to what Puka Nacua was in week 2, especially if you paid a bunch to get Achane on waivers this week. I think you just go ahead and play him because we're all guessing at what his usage looks like going forward. You know, we have ways to try to make our best guesses, but it's ultimately a guess. Nobody went into last week saying, oh, he's going to get 5 more carries than Raheem Mostert today, and he's going to not stop running until he reaches the end zone. So I think if you paid a bunch for Achane, you're probably starting him this week. If you already had Achane rostered going into that week, it's a little bit of a different decision. You can weigh him against who you have available.
Yeah, I would find it tough to go onto my fantasy team lineup page and not put Achane and Raheem Mostert in my starting lineup this week, right? Like, and this is even a case where it's tough to make the projections work here because, we only have so many carries for the Dolphins to divvy up. And like you said, we don't know how they're going to be divvied. Someone like Achane, even if the usage isn't great, like his big playability that we thought he had and he showed last week in this scheme, I mean, it's tough to want to start someone who, might only get 8 touches, but like if you're going to start someone that gets 8 touches, I want it to be Achane at this point. And I guess, by the way, it's Achane is how he wants it pronounced.
That's what I
was just starting to get the pronunciation down. Now it's Achane, so I guess we should start working on that. But if there's someone on low volume you want to play, it's a big play guy in this offense. This will be a tough test for Miami in the running game in particular. The Bills are 6th in run defense DVOA. They're 2nd in overall defensive DVOA. So, tough test for this Dolphins offense, but I mean, I'm not betting against this offense in any matchup right now.
Here's an interesting stat on that front too, from Rich Rebar via Josh Norris of Underdog. The Bills are 8th best in yards before contact per carry allowed. They are the league worst in yards after contact per carry allowed. So this backfield, which is built to maximize those yards after contact and, ideally not get contacted. But that seems like the key with the Bills is if they get to you in the backfield, you're pretty much done. If you get past that first wave, then there's lots of space. That says the D-line is good. The linebackers are I think that this specific Miami matchup is built to try to exploit that. They've done a great job at creating that initial opening. And obviously the speed of these running backs kicks in if you get that space. So for Achane, like if I'm making a decision in my lineup, if it's close, I would rather lose by trusting Achane and Mike McDaniel this week after what they did last week than because I didn't believe in them. Like I said, with Puka in week 2, just go ahead and say, I'm going to take a shot that last week was, at least a sign of big things to come. Obviously not going to be repeated. Raheem Mostert, like, we can't project Raheem Mostert to be 3rd among running backs this week without giving him unreasonable expectations for yards per carry or touchdowns. But looking at the rankings, Christian McCaffrey and Tony Pollard are honestly the only guys that I can actually call better starters than Raheem Mostert this week. I mean, if it's my lineup, there's nobody else where I'm like, yeah, that guy definitely belongs ahead of Raheem Mostert in my lineup.
Yeah, Mostert's basically a must start. I mean, he's been good through 3 weeks, and as much as we like Achane, he's not going to become the workhorse here. He's basically a must start. A couple other notes I had here. I mean, first of all, this game has a 54-point over/under. Bills Dolphins. So that's tied with last week's Chargers Vikings game as the highest we've seen all season. So you just want to lean towards guys in this game in general. And then for Achane, he got 6 carries plus targets inside the 10-yard line last week to Raheem Mostert's 2. So I'm not saying like Achane is the guy at the goal line, but Miami's willing to use him there despite, being 190 pounds or whatever he is. So, that helps. He's not going to have to score from distance to, find the end zone. He can get those, goal line opportunities.
Everybody's the guy in that Miami backfield, to me, is the takeaway. Don't look at them as this guy's going to get goal line carries. This guy's going to get receiving. They're all going to be used all over the field. Beyond this week, I certainly think that both Achane and Raheem Mostert are sellable. I don't think that either one is somebody that you need to try to sell now because they're about to implode. So it really depends on what you have and what's available. From our Discord, there was one commish who reports that in his league, there is a trade that's been accepted of Achane for Travis Kelce. That's where it's at. I wouldn't expect that to work in most places, but that's possible.
I mean, I'd put both those guys on the block this week and just see what kind of offers you get. This is a case where I wouldn't go out and make an offer, right? Because I don't want to set what I think the price is for either Mostert or Achane, but put them on the block and see if you get a Travis Kelce for Achane offer. And if you do, I'd get anything close to that, I would accept it.
I wouldn't mind going and offering Raheem Mostert for CeeDee Lamb or something if you want to try to set something like that. But that I would aim high if you are setting it. One more was Achane for Jakobi Meyers. I think that's a bit more of a question to answer. Which side of that are you taking? Assuming that you don't have more of a need at running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, just straight up, I prefer Achane. I just think he has a better chance to be a difference maker. And I like what we've seen from Meyers has been awesome so far as the volume goes. I don't expect him to continue getting the type of volume he has so far, but I just think Achane has the better chance to, be like a league winner in fantasy.
I think that's a fair deal on either side. If we do then assume that one team needs a running back, one team needs a wide receiver, I think that's a balanced deal. Jakobi Meyers has started out like somebody who could finish top 20 at wide receiver. Of course, we don't know about the workload for Achane. So I think either guy has a chance to help you more than we would have anticipated heading into the season. And, before we get away from Miami, Jeff Wilson Jr., where he's out there on waiver wires, he's going to contribute. These guys are awesome. He's also good. It's a great situation. So go ahead and stash Jeff Wilson Jr. where possible. Jared, it's week 4 and Zack Moss also looks like a must start. So I don't know. What do we do with him this week? And I guess we should stop it there because week 5 might include Jonathan Taylor.
There was a report yesterday though that, JT is still saying he doesn't want to play for the Colts. So we'll see. So I would call, Moss longer term a hold, because if JT doesn't come back, then, Moss is going to be this, weekly RB2, fringy RB1 at the type of usage he's been getting continues. He leads the NFL in carries over the last 2 weeks. He's 5th among running backs in PPR points over that span. We did see, Trey Sermon get a little work last week, which is probably good news for Moss, longer term. You don't want him going all Kyron Williams and playing 100% of the snaps for the Colts. Good matchup this week against the Rams. The Colts are home. The Rams are 29th in football, I keep wanting to say Football Outsiders run defense, DVOA. I know it's not a Football Outsiders anymore, but 29th in run defense, DVOA. Yeah. For the Rams. We were talking before the show. I think we both agree that Anthony Richardson's return hurts Moss a little bit in terms of, I think, mostly goal line carries, right? Richardson could steal theirs, whereas Minshew was not. So, I think that could have Moss sitting, a few spots lower in the rankings than he would be if it was Minshew under center. But, Moss is top 15 in our running back rankings. So, in most cases, he's going to be starting for you.
Crazy. Jahmyr Gibbs is up next, and he faces a likely challenge from David Montgomery again tonight against Green Bay, expecting Montgomery to come back from his injury, despite Tom Pelissero's best efforts to confuse all of us. And Pelissero says that David Montgomery is going to be the lead back, which is how Montgomery operated to open the season. Lead back, of course, means more carries for Montgomery, which we saw so far. It should mean plenty of work for Jahmyr Gibbs, but I mean, it's a wide variation versus the 17 carries that he got in the one full game without Montgomery.
I mean, over the first 7 quarters of the season before Montgomery got hurt, it was 37 carries for Montgomery to 11 for Jahmyr Gibbs. And then the other thing with Gibbs, the usage in the passing game has been all over the place. 2 targets in the opener, 9 in week 2, 2 targets in week 3. The route rate did stay pretty high in week 3, 50% route rate for Jahmyr Gibbs. So I don't think you're going to see many games the rest of the way where he only gets 2 targets. I don't think. The reason I like both these guys tonight is the matchup against Green Bay. They're 17th in run defense DVOA. They're 32nd in pass rate over expected against, meaning opposing teams are going run heavy against Green Bay. And I don't think you need to push the Lions too much to go run heavy, especially on the road here. So I think you're going to get also Devondre Campbell out for the Packers, one of their starting linebackers. So I think you're going to get a run leaning game plan from Detroit tonight, which should mean plenty of volume for Montgomery. And I think even Gibbs could get 8 to 10 carries in this game.
Certainly is worth noting the Packers have faced the Bears, the Falcons, and then the Saints, losing Derek Carr mid-game so far. So we'll see where things settle. But I agree, it's a matchup that should favor using the running backs plenty. And, missing Devondre Campbell certainly does not hurt the outlook for Jahmyr Gibbs. Longer term, I would like to try to sell him if possible. I think it would have been easier if Montgomery were going to miss this game to sell Gibbs ahead of that. But, otherwise, I just don't think that he has the ceiling that his draft position suggested. So I would like to try to get out before that is fully revealed, as opposed to waiting for something big.
I bet you could still sell him for a pretty nice price. There's bound to be an owner in your league that, still thinks Gibbs can be an RB1.
I don't know how many owners think Josh Jacobs is going to be an RB1 going forward. So he's an interesting guy to think about, both from whether to start him this week, which he's high in our running back ranking. So you're probably starting him this week, depending on who else you have, but more interesting as a potential buy. So what is your outlook on Josh Jacobs, either short or long term?
Could you sell Gibbs for Jacobs right now? I think it might be possible. And I would do that if I could, because the usage has been basically what we saw last year from Josh Jacobs when he was an elite fantasy back. Jacobs right now, among running backs, he's 3rd in snap rate, he's 11th in carries, he's 6th in targets, he's 4th in total opportunity. Couple problems. One, the Vegas O-line has been horrible. They are 31st in adjusted line yards right now. They were 1st in adjusted line yards last year, which always seemed fluky. That was one of the reasons I was kind of off Jacobs, during draft season, was I just thought, this Raiders O-line just on paper is not nearly as good as what it showed last year. That's probably not as bad as it's played so far. So I think, that hopefully there'll be some improvement there. And Jacobs too. I mean, he's 45th among 48 qualifiers in yards before contact per attempt, which is, again, more of an O-line stat, but he's also just 39th among those 48 running backs in yards after contact per attempt. So he's not playing as well as he did last year either. I think the holdout has at least something to do with this too, right? Like he wasn't with the team at all this offseason. So maybe he's still knocking off some rust. I can't imagine he's going to be this inefficient the rest of the season. The workload's going to be there. Like they're not going to anyone else. So I do think Jacobs is a buy low right now.
It's not likely to stay this bad. At the same time, you have to wonder how much upside there really is in an offense that doesn't look good, behind an O-line that doesn't look good, under a coach that I don't trust. So I do think that it's going to get better. I would be limited in my optimism for him. So just looking at some actual sample trades from our Discord group, we've got one wondering whether they should send Kyren Williams away for Josh Jacobs. For me, I say no on that one. It seems crazy if you just compare those guys heading into the season. Obviously, Kyren Williams was nothing to us a month ago, and Josh Jacobs was, maybe he's not RB1 like last year, but he's an RB1. To me, though, you're trading what's working in that case for something that you hope will work. And we already had our reservations about Jacobs heading into the season. Yeah. So I would rather just stick with what's working in Kyren Williams rather than, chase something that I'm not in love with the ceiling on.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I mean, the argument for Jacobs would be just that we've seen him be this workhorse back and he's more built for it. Whereas, Kyren Williams didn't do it in college. He's, sub 200 pounds. Like, can he hold up with this type of workload? As long as Williams does hold up under this type of workload, like he definitely cannot produce Jacobs. That's a case where I'd want Jacobs plus another piece if I'm selling Kyren Williams. And if I can get that, I would do it. Cause I don't think there's a huge gap between Kyren Williams and Josh Jacobs.
I would hope that for Jacobs' sake, I would hope that there doesn't end up being a huge gap between them. For what it's worth on Jacobs, though, we also saw 3 other seasons where he played well enough that nobody wanted to draft him heading into his breakout 4th season. Jerome Ford for Josh Jacobs. Which side are you doing?
Jacobs. Ford's going to be fine. He's going to be a great pickup. We already saw Kareem Hunt and even Pierre Strong get involved last week. So I just think Jacobs is going to beat Ford handily in volume, and I'll go with that.
That's one where if somebody offered it to me, I think I would go ahead and take Jacobs, just, betting on some rebound there. It's not one that I would think I would actively go offer because we don't really know about Jerome Ford yet. And I believe in the Browns being able to support that running back and scoring points better than I believe in the Raiders. So I'm curious to see what happens there. And then one more non-PPR, Jared, would you give Isaiah Pacheco to get Josh Jacobs, non-PPR?
Non-PPR always breaks my brain. I feel like I can't comprehend it. I would rather have Jacobs though than Pacheco.
That one's tough, but I'm not a huge Pacheco believer. Obviously, it's Chiefs running back versus Jacobs, but I would give Isaiah Pacheco and take a shot on Josh Jacobs. If I lose by betting on last year's number 1 overall fantasy back to at least help my team this year, then I guess I'll take that loss. Our weekly trade targets article posts every Wednesday afternoon. It's available now on draftsharks.com. We got weekly buy, sell, and hold recommendations. There's an extensive chart from our chartist in residence, Alex Korf. We check the values on basically every player, comparing our rankings versus the market for that player. You can check that out now or anytime on draftsharks.com. And then, of course, go from there to the trade value charts to start building your deal. You get the trade navigator to find the best team to trade with in your league and measure that trade before you actually send it to know that it's benefiting your team. So check it all out, draftsharks.com. And Jared, I said it was the last one, but I've actually got one more in transitioning to the next player because someone in our DS Discord has the offer of getting Josh Jacobs, giving Puka Nacua. I would make that one, giving away Puka Nacua, assuming that I need the running back more than the wide receiver. But honestly, probably anyway, because a running back that hits is going to be worth more than a wide receiver that hits at the level that we expect Nacua the rest of the way.
I'm with you there. And that's assuming Cooper Kupp returns, which I think will happen at some point. I don't know if you caught Sean McVay's comments. I think it was yesterday. Kind of seemed like iffy whether Kupp would be back for week 5. But I mean, at some point you got to think Kupp's going to be back. And then I think, Nacua definitely becomes, more of a wide receiver too. So I would give that for Jacobs for sure.
Yeah, it seemed like cautious optimism. Like that's the hope, is that he's ready for week 5, where he doesn't want to commit to it, but they're still leaning that way. So does that mean we should sell Puka Nacua hard right now before Cooper Kupp does come back, if we assume that it's going to be soon? I mean, just for some context, we got 5 catches for 72 yards from the rookie in week 3, and it felt disappointing versus what he did the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And 21% target share for Puka Nacua. So it's still a strong game if that's like his floor without Cooper Kupp. It's tough to know what the market is out there for Puka Nacua. Like if you can get someone at the level of Josh Jacobs, I would sell Puka Nacua. Now, I also don't think he's going to become useless when Cooper Kupp returns. Because I do think Puka will be, I'd say the clear number 2 still. I mean, Tutu Atwell's had a good season, but I think Nacua will still be, pretty clearly ahead of Tutu Atwell when Kupp returns. So again, I still think Nacua could be, a lower end wide receiver too. So I definitely wouldn't be giving him away for nothing. But again, if you can get someone who, we view as a, RB1 like Josh Jacobs is, I would make a trade like that.
The Rams have traditionally ranked among the league's most frequent 3 wide receiver set teams under Sean McVay, and that was with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp healthy and Brandon Cooks and Sammy Watkins, and not this group that they have this year. And they've been targeting those wide receivers ahead of Tyler Higbee this year, so I would assume that they will find plenty of ways to use all of these guys. I don't think Puka Nacua or Tutu Atwell is going to disappear after this. We'll see. I'm a little bit less certain that Nacua is going to stay clearly as the number 2 ahead of Tutu, because he works in more similar ways to Kupp than Tutu does. Just the deep speed with Atwell, it's a different element that he brings, but I don't know. We don't know about that until we see it. So I would say I'm not selling hard on Puka. I'm not trying to get rid of him now before his value evaporates, but he's certainly sellable.
Yeah, the Rams are also 3rd in pass rate over expected so far, which I think makes sense when your only running back is Kyren Williams and he's, sub 200 pounds. You're not going to, skew run, and you'll be giving him, 16 to 20 carries per game. So the pass heavy nature here of the Rams is going to help all these wide receivers.
Herms took an in-depth look at Calvin Ridley and kind of the Jaguars offense in general for dynasty managers this week. So check that out on draftsharks.com. But Jared, we're focused on week 4 and even beyond that in redraft. So we got to figure out now what to do with Calvin Ridley and maybe some others among the Jaguars. I think it's necessary to place Ridley in the right range usage wise so far, because there have been wide swings in his production. He looked excellent in week 1, has looked the opposite 2 weeks since. So he is 26th in target share so far. I was surprised. I saw that number today, and I was surprised that he was that low in that category, but also 8th in air yards share. He's, of course, the league leader in drops, which I think everybody knows at this point. So he's basically being used like a mid-range wide receiver 2 so far. That's where he's at in expected PPR points, and he's scoring way below that level. What are you doing with Calvin Ridley, on all of that?
Yeah, I think mid-range wide receiver 2 sounds right. And there were a lot of good stats in Herm's article. The one that blew my mind, Calvin Ridley has caught 5 of 18 targets over the last 10 quarters. That is just insane for any wide receiver, and a wide receiver of Ridley's talent playing with Trevor Lawrence. Like 5 of 18 is insane. As you said, he has the league high 4 drops. I don't know what's going on. I mean, I feel like you can't blame this on rust, because everything we heard all summer was he was looking awesome. Then he comes out in week 1 and looks awesome. And now he's struggling. So it's tough to blame it on rust. I don't know. I'm just going to bet on, whether you think Ridley is still the guy he was, last time we saw him, that's a fair question, but I still think he's a good receiver playing with a good quarterback. Like I'm still going to bet on that again, at least at mid-range wide receiver 2 type of level going forward.
I've certainly never played professional football, in case that's a revelation to anybody watching or listening, but just the way sports work in general, sometimes you have bad games or bad stretches. And then a lot of times those bad games or bad stretches can get into your head and, hurt your confidence going forward. So it has to be the kind of thing that he can work through. Whether he will, we'll see, but it doesn't seem like an uncorrectable issue. So as long as Jacksonville keeps using him the same way, that tells us that they believe he's, that good a player, and that he'll come around, and that just more experience and game experience specifically will iron out the issues, and that he will produce. I think as long as you're treating him like wide receiver 16-ish, which is where we said he was in usage, that's going to be a fair level. He's going to let you down at times. He's going to deliver at times, along the lines of T. Higgins.
Yeah, agreed there. And Trevor Lawrence is fine, by the way. The Jags have 9 drops. That leads the NFL. Lawrence is 2nd in PFF passing grade through 3 weeks. So he's a guy, if you could, if you have a need at quarterback and can buy low on Trevor Lawrence, I would take that opportunity, because I'm still a big believer in him. He needs Calvin Ridley to get going. He could use Zay Jones back from his knee injury, which doesn't look like that's going to happen this week, but eventually, I still think Lawrence, it's going to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback, and could even be, top 7 or 8.
I sure hope that he's fine, because he's my quarterback in my FFPC main event league. Tank Dell to wrap up the wideout section. And I think Tank Dell is an interesting one for projections versus start decisions. Like when we're projecting these players, we have to determine what is a sensible expectation for that player for the week. When you're setting your lineup, you don't. Like, you're not weighing Tank Dell versus everyone. You're weighing him versus 2 or 3 other players. So I think when you're deciding to put a guy in your lineup, and he is low in wide receiver 3 territory, which I think is fair, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he outperforms that. And so I think it's easier to take a shot on that upside when you are setting an individual lineup than it is for us when we're ranking him versus, 100 other wide receivers literally for the week.
Yeah. And to me, Dell is low in wide receiver 3 territory, only because I'm scared of this matchup for Houston. Their backup left tackle, Josh Jones, is not expected to play this week either. So they're going to be down to their 3rd string left tackle. Their starting right tackle, Titus Howard, is on IR, for this matchup against, TJ Watt and the Steelers pass rush. Stroud has been awesome so far. He's been awesome under pressure, which he's been facing a lot of. But I do have some just concerns about the Texans offense in general in this matchup. Dell is our top ranked Texans wide receiver, which I think he deserves to be at this point. He leads the team in target share over the last 2 weeks. He leads the team in air yard share. Jacob Gibbs of CBS pointed out that Dell also leads Houston in first read target share, which that's become like the new hot fantasy stat lately, which it makes sense, right? If like first reads, who is the offense designing plays for? Who are these targets meant to go for if everything goes right in the play? And Tank Dell's leading Houston in those as well. So I think at this point, he deserves to be the top fantasy wide receiver in that Houston wide receiver core.
Agreed. And we've watched him lead in targets his first 2 starts in the NFL. So got to just go with that. David Njoku is not somebody that we got to still go with because he hasn't delivered for us so far. Dead last among qualifiers in air yards share behind, and that's across positions, behind Kadarius Toney, Gerald Everett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Dalton Kincaid, and Noah Gray, to put some context on it. Jared, what are we doing with David Njoku this week? And then, I mean, longer term, is he droppable for some other guys?
Yeah, I mean, you pinpointed the problem. Njoku has a 1.5 yard average depth of target this season. He was at 7.7 last year, which is, about average for a tight end. So 1.5 is stupid. The Browns are using him stupidly. Elijah Moore is also being used a bunch near the line of scrimmage, and Moore is just seeing those short targets over David Njoku. So Njoku sitting on a 12% target share only, which is not a great mark for a tight end. He was at 20% last year. So to me, I would not want to start him this week in this matchup against Baltimore. That game just looks like it's going to be low scoring and pretty ugly from a fantasy perspective. I would not drop Njoku though, just because tight end is so shaky, and I still believe just in his talent. So I think if the usage improves for Njoku, he's someone that can still be very useful for us in fantasy.
Now, I can agree with not just a general drop for whomever, but what about dropping specifically for Hunter Henry if Henry's available?
Yeah, I would do that.
What about for Zach Ertz, the target monster and number 3 among all tight ends in air yard share?
I would not do that. Ertz came crashing back to earth last week, and his route rate was down in the 60s. I don't really know why. I don't know. I'd have to look into it more, but I'm out on Ertz still. It wasn't hard to push me back out on Ertz. I'm out on Ertz.
He's a very low ceiling player, so it's not somebody where you're missing out on something big if you don't take Zach Ertz, even though he had 6 catches in each of the first 2 games. And then finally, what about David Njoku versus Jake Ferguson from the Cowboys?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Ferguson next year. I would still lean Njoku, but even like Ferguson and Henry, that's a case where I'd really want to roster both of those guys. Roster 2 tight ends. If you don't have one of those top 4 or 5 guys, I think it's worth rostering 2 tight ends, playing matchups, or ideally just one of them emerges as someone we can start every week. Hunter Henry's close to that, I think. But again, I'd still like to just roster 2 of them.
Yeah, so what is it with Jake Ferguson? Because he's somebody that gets brought up. He hasn't put up big numbers so far, but he gets brought up as somebody who's going to start delivering numbers. What is it that makes him a going to deliver guy?
Ferguson's tough. I'm glad we're talking about him here because I almost wrote him up in the usage takeaways article that I've been doing. I almost wrote him up this week. He didn't quite make my top 10, but Ferguson is 6th among all tight ends in targets. He's 2nd in red zone targets, 5th in end zone targets, despite running a pass route on just 56% of Cowboys pass plays. So to me, something's got to give. Either the route rate's going to climb and then Ferguson, has a chance to be a top 12 fantasy tight end, or I can't imagine the volume continuing when he's only, running a route on barely over half of the team's pass plays. Ferguson has a 27% target per route rate. That's 5th best among tight ends. So he's an excellent stash at this point while we, kind of wait to see how this evolves from here.
That whole offense seems like it's still evolving. We want to just believe that it's strong, but there have been injuries here and there. There have been changes. Brandon Cooks is new to the team. So I think everything's kind of falling into place. I agree that if he stays at that low of a route rate, it's tough to imagine the volume staying, but the volume has been good so far and the position has been so bad that you just take somebody that's in a good situation and getting opportunities. 5th in expected PPR points so far, tied for 2nd in expected touchdowns among tight ends, according to PFF. So Jake Ferguson, somebody worth using. I think if you really need to have 1 tight end as opposed to keeping 2, I'd be fine with dropping David Njoku for Jake Ferguson because I think they're similar in what their ceiling and floor is the rest of the way. I think that's probably a big takeaway at tight end is there are few that are actually in for something huge. So I wouldn't not drop somebody like that for fear that you're going to miss out on something big. I don't think that David Njoku is going to turn into a league winner. So, if he rebounds and you miss out on that, that's probably not terrible versus Hunter Henry, Jake Ferguson, or Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to lose at tight end at this point. Outside of Kelsey and Hawkinson, I mean, even, Waller and Andrews have been underwhelming so far. So, I mean, pray at tight end. That's my best advice.
You might have to pray for your streaming defense this week as well, Jared, because I mean, it looks like it should be the Broncos against the Bears this week and then the Jets next week if they completely renovate the defense versus what allowed the Dolphins 70 points last week. So if they fire everybody and sign a whole bunch of new players and coaches, then does that make Denver the streaming defense for both this week and next?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just starting defense against the Bears at this point. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is here. I will be rolling out the Broncos defense in quite a few of my season-long teams this week. I picked them up I think on both my main event teams. I have Broncos defense. The defenses to face the Bears so far this season have finished 4th, 2nd, and 5th on the week in fantasy points. So, I mean, Denver was pathetic last week, but it was half that. It was half just Miami's brilliance on offense. And then if Denver disappoints this week against the Bears, I probably would not use them next week against the Jets.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, the Bears have faced Green Bay, Tampa Bay, Kansas City so far. So it's not like they've hit elite defenses and just can't do anything. They just can't do anything. So I agree. You go ahead and take a shot on Denver, assuming that you don't have, a really strong defense that's also in a positive matchup like Philly against Washington. But if you need an answer this week, take a shot on Denver, fingers crossed. And then if they work out, then they should be able to work out next week against Zach Wilson. You can check the week 4 rankings on draftsharks.com, just in case Denver is not available in your league and you need another one. We're going to keep updating that and all other positions for injuries and other news throughout the week, or even just arguing about players, which is what we do behind the scenes until everything is set, ahead of kickoff. We moved Zack Moss up the rankings just this morning for that, no change to his situation, just more numbers we look at, more thought about who would start over whom in our own lineups. That's what moves guys in the rankings, if you make a strong enough argument against Jared. Jared, of course, also just posted his weekly matchups that matter article this morning. So check that out for lots of info that can help you make your lineup decisions across formats this week. And if you haven't done so already, become a Draft Sharks insider so you can gain access to all of the tools and content available all the time to help you win your season.